My name is Emily Turner, though most people simply call me Emily. Even now, I sit in my modest apartment, coffee in hand, replaying that evening in my mind, the night my entire world changed in a single moment. My son, Dylan, was marrying his new wife, Jessica. I had only met her twice before the wedding, two brief encounters where she asked pointed questions about my modest lifestyle and whether I might need financial help in the future. Perhaps she was testing me. Perhaps she was simply curious. Either way, those moments left me with a lingering sense of unease. The wedding venue was breathtaking. Set on over 50 acres of rolling hills in Virginia, the estate included a private chapel that could seat 300 guests and gardens that looked like they had been designed by a master landscaper. Jessica's dress alone could have cost more than most people earn in a year, and Dylan's face glowed with a happiness I hadn't seen since his father passed away. I chose my outfit carefully, a simple navy blue dress from a department store, paired with my grandmother's pearl necklace. Nothing flashy, nothing designed to attract attention. I had learned long ago that the key to privacy was to appear exactly as people expect, a comfortably well-off widow living modestly on an engineer's pension and her late husband's life insurance. The ceremony itself was beautiful, though I noticed Jessica's mother, Paula, scrutinizing me with an intensity that made me feel like an ill-fitting piece of furniture in her opulent world. The reception, however, was where everything changed. The Reynolds family spared no expense. Ice sculptures, a 12-piece orchestra, flowers in quantities that could supply a boutique florist for months. I sat quietly in a corner, watching my 32-year-old son dance with his bride, when Jessica approached with her parents. "Mom, Dad," she said, her tone sweet but artificial, designed to charm yet slightly venomous. "I want you to meet Dylan's mother." And then came the words that altered everything. Robert Reynolds' eyes locked onto me, recognition flooding his expression. "Emily Turner," he murmured, his voice cutting through the hum of the reception. "Aren't you the investor who acquired my company?" Jessica's face went pale as arrogance melted into confusion. Paula Reynolds brought a hand to her neck, her diamond bracelet sparkling in the light, as if trying to mask the gears turning in her socialite mind. Most people don't understand what real wealth looks like. Diamonds, designer labels, luxury cars, they assume these are the indicators. But a woman in a simple, elegant dress, shopping at ordinary stores, and driving a reliable car, that is the kind of invisible wealth that surprises. And it's exactly the strategy that had kept me invisible for 15 years. It all began with my late husband, Thomas, and an invention that changed everything. A small technology that revolutionized cell phone battery efficiency. We were both engineers in Austin, working for a tech firm. When Thomas developed his power management system in 2010, we thought we might retire comfortably. Little did we know we were sitting on a fortune. The patent sold in 2012 for $25 million. Dylan, then 24 and freshly out of graduate school, was full of dreams, eager to build his career. That same day, Thomas and I decided to tell him we had received a modest payout, comfortable but not extravagant. Dylan never questioned it. He assumed it was perhaps $1 million or $2 at most. But the $25 million was just the beginning. Thomas and I began investing systematically, conservative stocks, then growth companies as we learned the market, real estate in emerging regions, and tech startups with solid foundations. Thomas had an uncanny ability to spot undervalued opportunities before anyone else. By the time he passed away in 2020, our portfolio had grown to over $800 million. 2 years later, I acquired Reynolds Holdings. The irony was delicious. While Jessica had been subtly judging me and questioning my finances, her father had unknowingly been relying on my strategic decisions for the past 3 years. "Excuse me, Robert, I think you might be mistaken," I said quietly, though we both knew he wasn't. The memory of that boardroom 3 years ago flashed in my mind. Me, silent, letting the lawyers do the work. He had assumed I was just someone's wife, there as a formality. Now, there was no mistaking it. I was far from invisible. The next morning, I sat in my cozy apartment, sipping coffee as Dylan paced back and forth like a caged animal. He had called me at 7, desperate for answers. I hadn't slept a wink. Robert Reynolds' shocked face and Jessica's panicked gaze haunted my thoughts. "Mom, you need to explain what happened last night," Dylan said, running his hands through his hair. "What kind of questions?" I asked, already suspecting the answers. He asked about Dad's patents, your investments, our family's finances. Dylan's serious brown eyes bore into mine. Suddenly, my coffee tasted bitter. How could I explain that while Dylan was working 60-hour weeks to earn a raise, I had been managing a portfolio worth more than a small nation? "Dylan, sit down," I said gently. "We need to talk." Before I could continue, my phone buzzed. A message from Jessica. "Emily, let's have lunch today. Dylan and I want to discuss some family matters with you, now that we're officially family." I showed it to Dylan, watching his expression shift from confusion to concern. "What do you think she wants?" he asked. I had a pretty good idea. Jessica Reynolds wasn't the type to leave questions unanswered, especially when money was involved. The question was, how much did Robert really figure out after that one brief boardroom encounter 3 years ago? "I think," I said cautiously, "your wife might be smarter than we gave her credit for." Just then, Dylan's phone rang, Jessica calling again. "Dylan, I'd like us all to have lunch. There are a few family matters I think Emily should know now that we're officially connected." When he hung up, Dylan looked at me, the same look he had as a teenager when he suspected I knew more than I let on. "Mom, are you hiding something about our family's finances?" Outside my window, the world moved on. People worried about mundane things like meetings and deadlines. I envied that simplicity. Finally, I said, "It's time I tell you everything." Jessica had arrived 45 minutes early, already seated at a corner table in the city's priciest restaurant. Her blonde hair was flawless, her business suit sharp. She had clearly done her homework. I ordered a bottle of Bordeaux, moderately expensive, enough to set a tone but not reveal the scale of my fortune. Jessica leaned forward with a small, calculating smile, her green eyes scanning my simple black dress and understated jewelry. "It seems your father told you about discreet investors," I said softly. "And you want to understand more?" She nodded, and the tension was palpable. The quiet corner of the restaurant had suddenly turned into a battlefield. The lunch began quietly, with an almost civilized calm, but beneath it simmered a current of tension that could have shattered glass. Jessica had come prepared, not just with a smile, but with evidence, research, and carefully calculated questions. Her green eyes flicked toward me occasionally, testing, probing, trying to measure how much I really knew about her family. "Emily," she began, "I studied finance at Wharton. I've always been fascinated by corporate structures, acquisitions, and investment strategies. Your father mentioned that Reynolds Holdings buyer was surprisingly discreet. That caught my attention." I sipped my wine and waited. I had learned long ago that letting people reveal themselves first is the best strategy. She continued, "Discreet investors are rarely quiet without reason. Often, it's because they control significant resources. I wanted to understand who was making those decisions, especially since the acquisition directly impacted my family." Dylan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I could see the conflict in his eyes, loyalty to his wife, confusion about me, and frustration at being caught in the middle. "And how did you go about figuring that out?" I asked, calmly. Jessica reached into her folder and pulled out a small, worn news clipping from 3 years ago, a report about Reynolds Holdings acquisition. In the photo, almost hidden between lawyers and executives, was a woman in a navy blue dress, her face partially obscured. "Look closely," Jessica said. "Notice the posture, the way she stands, her height. It's remarkably similar to you." Dylan's fork paused mid-air as realization slowly dawned. His brow furrowed. "Mom, could it really be you?" I studied Jessica, appreciating her methodical preparation. She had done her homework, but in doing so, she had also walked straight into a trap of her own making. Coincidences happen all the time, I said lightly, like someone suddenly appearing to purchase your father's company and then disappearing afterward. Her sharpness did not falter. Sure, coincidences. But the timing, the lack of public information, it's not just chance. I've checked shell company filings, traced acquisition structures, and even looked into corporate boards linked to the purchase. Dylan's eyes widened. Mom, she's thorough. Yes, she is, I admitted, keeping my tone casual, though my mind raced. 15 years of careful concealment were unraveling in front of me, and yet I remained calm. This was precisely the moment I had prepared for, though I hadn't expected it to be so theatrical. Jessica leaned closer, lowering her voice as though sharing a secret. I also found evidence that lines of credit were opened recently, likely to fund additional research into your investments. Dylan put his hand on my arm. Mom, what does that mean? I took a deep breath. It means she's not just curious, she's actively investigating us. The conversation grew tense, the air thick with unspoken challenges. Dylan, torn between his mother and his wife, tried to mediate. Jessica, this isn't about proving something, is it? We're supposed to be family now. Jessica's smile was calm, but her eyes betrayed determination. Family or not, I need clarity. Our futures, our financial stability are connected to these decisions. I realized then that the stakes were higher than I had initially considered. This was no longer a simple test of character. Jessica had escalated from casual curiosity to calculated research, and her actions could have long-term consequences. That night, back in my apartment, I spread out the files I had prepared over the years. Every investment, every trust, every acquisition carefully documented. 15 years of strategic planning had gone into this portfolio, and now I had to anticipate the moves of an opponent who was bright, aggressive, and fearless. My phone buzzed. Dylan, Mom, can we come over tomorrow night? Jessica wants to talk through ideas for managing the family finances now that she knows. I smiled faintly. Jessica had underestimated me if she thought she could manipulate the situation so easily. The truth was, I had spent the last 15 years mastering invisibility, not for secrecy's sake, but for strategy. Now, it was time to show her that experience mattered. The next evening, Dylan and Jessica arrived, carrying the aura of diplomats entering a negotiation. I had prepared a simple cheese platter and a moderately priced bottle of wine. Nothing extravagant, nothing that would hint at my fortune. Mom, thanks for having us, Dylan said. Jessica, impeccably dressed, opened a folder with neatly organized documents. Emily, I want to propose a collaborative approach for our family's financial planning. I believe it benefits everyone if we act strategically together. Dylan looked overwhelmed. Mom, maybe we should slow down. I remained calm. Tell me more, I said. Jessica's eyes sparkled. We should start with a substantial initial contribution, perhaps $50 million, enough to make a meaningful impact and establish credibility. My lips curved into a faint smile. $50 million from the woman who had questioned my finances and called me a family embarrassment less than a week ago? And the governance structure? I asked. 3 trustees, 3 votes, equal representation, she replied confidently. I put down my wine glass and leaned forward. Jessica, can I ask a simple question? She blinked. Of course. Do you love Dylan for who he is, or do you love what you believe marrying him could provide? The question struck her off guard. Her composure faltered, her eyes flicking between Dylan and me. What kind of question is that? A very important one, I said softly, because if this is about resources, control, or perceived advantage, we need to address it now, before anyone's life is permanently affected. Jessica's hands trembled slightly as she opened her folder again. I noticed the tension in Dylan. He had always trusted his mother's judgment, and now he was realizing that reality could be far more complex than he imagined. I showed her the investigation records James Sullivan had prepared, the private investigators, the law consultations, the recent credit inquiries. Her face went pale as she realized that her efforts to uncover secrets had been traced and documented. This is your evidence?" she stammered. "Yes," I said. "I don't hide my life from curiosity. I simply prepare for it." Dylan's eyes darted between us. "Mom, what does that mean?" "It means," I said, "that we need to understand what everyone's intentions are before we make any decisions. You married for love, or at least I hope you did, but if there are other motivations at play, we need clarity." The room was silent. Even the distant hum of the city seemed to pause, as if acknowledging the tension that had taken root in this quiet corner of the restaurant. For the first time in 15 years, I felt the weight of my hidden fortune, my careful investments, and my strategic invisibility, not as a shield, but as a tool in a battle I had not fully anticipated. And Jessica had just entered the arena. The following morning, I woke with a clarity I haven't felt in years. Jessica's audacity at lunch had made one thing painfully clear. She didn't just want answers. She wanted influence, control, and a stake in decisions I had spent 15 years carefully safeguarding. I poured my coffee slowly, allowing the bitter warmth to sharpen my focus. Dylan's voice from last night still echoed in my mind. "Mom, what do we do now?" He didn't understand the full extent of what was at stake, and frankly, that was intentional. I had raised him to value independence and integrity, not to rely on inheritance or hidden fortunes. That lesson was about to be tested in a way I could never have predicted. By 9 a.m., I was at James Sullivan's office, reviewing the financial intelligence I had ordered the night before. The Reynolds family was in far worse shape than I had imagined. Their sprawling estate was mortgaged, their investment accounts drained, and their lifestyle maintained by short-term loans. All of their perceived stability was an illusion. James leaned back, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the files. "Emily, your daughter-in-law's investigations are much more serious than casual curiosity. She's filing formal inquiries with the SEC and consulting legal counsel specializing in family trusts and estate disputes. If this continues, it could escalate into regulatory scrutiny." I kept my voice calm, almost conversational. "And the consequences?" James sighed. "Even if your structures are perfectly legal, regulators will investigate. You could face months or even years of audits. Public exposure, legal fees, potential media attention. It could be messy." I tapped my fingers on the table, thinking. 15 years of careful, private planning had been designed to avoid this very scenario. But I had anticipated competition, and I had learned that preparation was everything. "We need a strategy," I said finally. "We don't react, we preempt." Later that evening, Dylan and Jessica arrived at my apartment. I had prepared a modest dinner, simple and deliberate: roasted vegetables, a fresh baguette, and a bottle of Bordeaux. Enough to suggest sophistication, but nothing extravagant. I wasn't here to impress. I was here to control the narrative. Jessica began immediately, spreading documents across the table with precision. "Emily, we need a family strategy, coordinated investments, shared foundations, transparency across generations. I think we can protect your privacy while ensuring our family's future." I allowed her to speak, letting her unfold her plan like a chess player revealing her opening move. "And the funding?" I asked finally, leaning back. "Well," she replied, "we need a substantial contribution. 50 million would give us credibility in philanthropic circles and leverage in investment decisions." My smile was barely noticeable. 50 million? From the woman who had called me a family embarrassment less than a week ago? "And governance," I pressed. 3 trustees, equal votes, fair representation. I put my glass down and leaned forward. "Jessica, do you truly love Dylan for him or for the wealth you believe he represents?" The question froze her. Her eyes darted between Dylan and me. What kind of question is that?" "A very important one," I said, calmly. "If your motivations are about control, wealth, or status, we need to know before it's too late." She faltered, and Dylan's face darkened with confusion and frustration. I could see his protective instincts warring with his desire for honesty. I then presented the evidence. James had meticulously documented her private investigations, the law consultations, credit inquiries, and steps to trace corporate ownership. Her confident veneer began to crack as she realized her efforts had been anticipated and traced. This is your proof?" she asked, voice trembling. "Yes," I said evenly. "I've never hidden from curiosity. I've only prepared for it." Dylan's gaze was intense. "Mom, what does this mean for us?" "It means," I replied, "we need to understand everyone's intentions before taking the next steps. If there are hidden motives, they must be revealed now." 3 days later, the first legal maneuver arrived. James called early, his tone grave. "Emily, there's been an official inquiry. The SEC has received complaints about your investment structures. Someone is claiming potential violations, improper reporting, and misuse of shell companies." I exhaled slowly. The battle lines were officially drawn. It wasn't just about curiosity anymore. It was now legal warfare, a challenge to everything I had built. "Who?" I asked calmly. "I suspect your daughter-in-law," James said. "Her filings are consistent with someone attempting to force a settlement or uncover hidden assets. This is sophisticated, deliberate, and aggressive." I closed my eyes for a moment. 15 years of strategic privacy, all built to protect Dylan and our family's independence, were now under siege. But I had faced bigger challenges before. I was ready. That night, I began my own counter-preparations. Detailed timelines, legal analyses, and investment records were spread across my dining table. Every acquisition, every portfolio adjustment, every minor legal maneuver was documented. Jessica had entered the game, but she had underestimated one thing: the depth of preparation, strategy, and foresight that had governed my life for the past decade and a half. Dylan texted, "Mom, she wants to discuss next steps tomorrow. Be ready." I smiled faintly. She wanted a fight. I would give her a chess game she wouldn't anticipate. The next evening, Dylan and Jessica arrived. Their demeanor suggested civility, but beneath it was a tension so thick it felt tangible. Jessica had prepared documents outlining potential family trust structures, control mechanisms, and governance models. She was attempting to frame this as a collaborative family effort, but her intent was clear. I began calmly. "Jessica, you've demonstrated diligence, and I respect preparation. But let's clarify one thing. This isn't a negotiation over ideas. It's a negotiation over intentions." Dylan blinked. "Mom, she's trying to help?" I shook my head. "Not exactly. She's trying to gain access and influence. That's different from help." Jessica's hand trembled slightly as I laid out the evidence of her private investigations, recent credit applications, and law consultations. Her eyes widened as she realized her every move had been traced. "You were building a case," I said softly, "and you didn't realize I had anticipated it." Dylan looked from Jessica to me, the lines between protection, honesty, and strategy becoming painfully clear. "Mom, what now?" I leaned back, letting the weight of my words settle. "Now we decide what matters most: control, transparency, or truth. And I will not allow manipulation to threaten my family or the future I've built for you." The room fell silent. Even the hum of the city seemed muted under the gravity of our conversation. 15 years of strategic invisibility had prepared me for this. Jessica's investigation, her threats, her ambition. She had entered the arena, and it was time for her to understand that I was not just a cautious investor. I was a strategist, and my moves had been calculated long before she arrived. The first volley had been fired. The legal notices, the private investigators, and her assumptions had all been met with measured preparation, and the game was now fully underway. The morning after the tense dinner, I sat alone at my kitchen table, a single espresso steaming in front of me. The city outside was alive with the ordinary, people rushing to meetings, coffee in hand, cars honking in traffic. To them, life was simple, predictable. To me, it was anything but. A battle had begun, one not fought with swords or guns, but with documents, strategy, and patience. And I intended to win. I reviewed the legal documents James had prepared overnight. Every shell company, every portfolio, every trust we had set up over the last 15 years was accounted for. Jessica had underestimated the complexity of what she had stumbled into. She believed a few hours of research and some strategic law consultations would give her leverage. She hadn't counted on decades of methodical planning. James called mid-morning. "Emily, I've reviewed everything. If we act now, we can contain this before it escalates further. She's aggressive, but predictable. She's relying on the assumption that you'll panic or negotiate out of fear." I smiled faintly. Panic isn't in my vocabulary. We mapped out a careful response, a counter-narrative for every potential claim, documentation for every investment, and clear proof of legality. James stressed one point repeatedly: don't underestimate her resourcefulness, but also don't let her intimidate you. By evening, Dylan arrived. His expression was a mix of worry and frustration. "Mom, she filed for separation. I don't know what to do." I reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Dylan, listen carefully. This isn't about winning a fight. It's about protecting the family and our future. We need to be methodical. Panic only gives her leverage." He looked at me, the weight of his confusion pressing down. "She married me, and now she's trying to dismantle everything." "Yes," I said softly, "and it's a choice you get to make. But understand this: she underestimated me, and that's our advantage." That night, I began preparing a precise record of all communications, investments, and legal structures, my own arsenal. I traced every shell company, every discrete acquisition, and every corporate maneuver. This wasn't just protection, it was a declaration. Anyone who challenged the Turner family would be met with clarity, precision, and resolve. The following day, Dylan and Jessica came over. Their posture suggested civility, but tension radiated from them like heat from a fire. Jessica had brought another folder, this time with revised proposals for a family trust and governance structure. She tried to maintain an air of cooperation, but I could see the ambition in her eyes. "Emily," she began, "we've thought through a plan that protects your privacy, benefits Dylan, and ensures fairness across the family. It's a collaborative approach." I allowed her to speak, letting her lay out every detail, every potential pathway she had envisioned. Then I leaned forward, my voice calm but unwavering. "Jessica, let's clarify something. This isn't a negotiation over ideas. This is a negotiation over intentions. Who stands to benefit and who stands to control?" Her face betrayed her, an almost imperceptible flicker of doubt. Dylan watched between us, his confusion turning to realization. "Mom, she really wants control," he muttered. I nodded. "Exactly. And that's why preparation matters. Transparency without clarity is vulnerability." I revealed the documents from James, the investigation timeline, credit inquiries, legal consultations, and the communications she had attempted to conceal. Jessica's composure faltered, her carefully rehearsed confidence cracking under the weight of evidence. "You were building a case," I said evenly, "but you didn't anticipate that I would see every move coming." Dylan's eyes widened as he processed the depth of the situation. "Mom, she's been planning this?" "Yes," I replied, "and now she knows that planning alone isn't enough. Knowledge without understanding is dangerous. We understand, we are prepared, and we are ready." Jessica's face paled. This is more than I expected." "You underestimated me," I said softly, the words carrying both truth and finality. 3 days later, the first official correspondence arrived. SEC inquiries, formal complaints, and legal notices, all directed at me. My preparation paid off. James and I reviewed each one meticulously, crafting responses that were airtight, methodical, and precise. "You've contained this remarkably," James said. "Her aggressive approach could have spiraled, but your preparation has neutralized her advantage." I smiled faintly. This is the price of 15 years of discretion and careful planning. We outlined a strategy: respond promptly, document every action, and maintain control over the narrative. I wasn't just defending my assets. I was defending my son's future, our family's integrity, and the principle that ambition should never exploit naivety. The next confrontation was unavoidable. Jessica filed for legal separation the following week. Dylan arrived at my apartment, exhausted and tense. "Mom, she's serious. She wants the assets tied to the family. She's threatening litigation." I poured a glass of wine and gestured for him to sit. "Dylan, listen. She's forcing a hand she doesn't understand. This isn't about money, it's about strategy. And strategy is where experience matters. Let her escalate. We respond intelligently, not emotionally." He ran a hand through his hair. "It feels like everything we've built, like our lives, is being threatened." "Exactly," I said. "But the difference between panic and preparation is everything. We know the rules of this game. We understand the board. And we are ready." That evening, I began drafting my own counterproposal. It would protect Dylan, safeguard privacy, and offer a controlled settlement that neutralized risk. 15 years of calculated discretion had trained me for this very moment. I wasn't just wealthy, I was strategically formidable. By the next morning, I had finalized a clear plan. 1. Offer a one-time settlement to resolve disputes without litigation. 2. Maintain complete control over personal and family assets. 3. Ensure Dylan's independence and career remain untarnished. 4. Demonstrate decisively that attempts at manipulation or coercion would not succeed. James reviewed it and nodded. "It's perfect. Clear, precise, and unassailable." I allowed myself a small smile. Preparation had turned tension into leverage, chaos into clarity. This wasn't just defense, it was a counterstrike. Dylan's expression the following evening reflected relief, but also lingering disbelief. "Mom, you're ruthless." I took his hand. "I'm careful, I'm strategic, and sometimes that looks like ruthlessness to those who don't understand the full picture." He nodded slowly. "I think I understand. Now." Jessica's arrival that night brought her usual polished composure, but her confidence had waned. She presented her proposals, legal assessments, and demands, attempting to frame the situation as a fair negotiation. But I had already anticipated every angle. I listened politely, letting her speak, then calmly presented my response, a settlement that was generous enough to resolve her concerns, yet structured to prevent any ongoing influence or future claims. The room went silent as I laid out the offer. $5 million, a clean separation, and the assurance that our family would no longer be subjected to manipulation or scrutiny. Dylan stared, stunned, as the logic crystallized before him. "This is it?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "A measured solution that protects everyone who matters and neutralizes those who sought to exploit ambition for personal gain." Jessica blinked, calculating, her legal team whispering urgently. $5 million, a fortune by most standards, yet inconsequential in the grand scope of what I controlled. She was faced with a stark choice: escalate and risk financial ruin, or accept the resolution and walk away. The weekend arrived with a rare quietness. The city seemed to exhale as if it knew the storm had passed, or at least paused. I spent the morning reviewing our finalized documents one last time, ensuring every detail was exact. Dylan sat across from me, sipping coffee, still processing the whirlwind of events from the last 2 weeks. "Mom, I don't know how you did it," he murmured, eyes wide with admiration and lingering disbelief. "It's like you knew everything before it even happened." I smiled faintly, taking a slow sip of my own coffee. Preparation isn't magic, Dylan. It's observation, understanding, and timing. You see, every action leaves a trail. Every intention has a signature. You just need to learn how to read it. He nodded slowly, absorbing the lesson. "So, she's gone? No more fights?" I leaned back in my chair, letting the sunlight spill across the polished table. Technically, the legal separation and the settlement are finalized. Practically, yes. This chapter is closed. The rest is just living and making sure what's ours remains ours. That afternoon, our lawyer, James, arrived with the final signed papers. Each document was immaculate, reviewed multiple times for precision and security. Jessica had accepted the settlement, a decision likely influenced by the meticulous evidence and structured counteroffer we had presented. She left the family estate quietly, her team trailing behind, her confidence diminished, but her dignity intact. James handed me the envelope with a professional nod. Everything is official. She's bound by the agreement, and your control over the assets is now fully secure. Legally, there's nothing more she can contest. I exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of tension finally lift. Thank you, James, for everything. This wouldn't have been possible without your guidance. He smiled, a mixture of pride and relief. It's been a privilege, Emily. You handled it with precision and calm most people only dream of having in crises like this. Dylan and I spent the evening walking through the city, a rare freedom filling the spaces where anxiety had lived. Streetlights glimmered off rain-slicked pavements, and the quiet chatter of pedestrians was a soothing soundtrack. I could see the relief etched into Dylan's features, the tension in his shoulders finally loosening. You know, Mom, I think I understand now, he said softly, why you always prepared for everything, why you're so cautious with people. It's not just about money or power, it's about protecting what matters. I nodded. Exactly. Wealth is meaningless if it comes with chaos and uncertainty. Preparation protects what truly matters: family, integrity, and the legacy we choose to leave behind. He looked at me, curiosity and admiration mingled in his eyes. Do you ever regret any of it? The secrecy, the planning, the constant vigilance? I paused, considering my answer. Regret? No. Responsibility? Always. Every decision, every plan, every precaution was for the future, yours and the family's. That's the difference between living for today and securing tomorrow. The next morning, I returned to the estate to oversee minor adjustments and ensure all security and organizational measures were updated. Each department, each accountant, each legal advisor was aligned, synchronized with our new directives. Nothing would be left to chance. As I walked through the corridors, I reflected on the ordeal. Jessica had been clever, yes, but not careful enough. She underestimated experience, patience, and the subtle power of strategic thinking. Ambition without preparation is reckless. Preparation without panic is formidable. And that was the principle that had carried us through. Later, Dylan joined me in my office. He had a small stack of papers in his hands, reports on new investments and opportunities. Mom, I want to start learning the ropes, really understanding how all this works, he said, determination replacing earlier confusion. I smiled, proud. Good. Knowledge is power, but applied knowledge, that's wisdom. Let's begin. I'll teach you how to read patterns, anticipate moves, and protect yourself, just like we did. Over the next few weeks, life gradually returned to its rhythm. Family dinners were quieter, yet warmer, filled with genuine laughter instead of the tension of potential confrontation. Dylan's confidence grew, his sense of independence reinforced by what he had witnessed. Our circle of trusted advisors remained active, but unobtrusively, ensuring stability without intrusion. One evening, as I reviewed correspondence in my study, I found a letter from Jessica. It was formal, respectful, and surprisingly succinct. No threats, no attempts to manipulate, just an acknowledgement of the settlement and a promise to respect boundaries. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. It was symbolic, more than practical. The acknowledgement that the game was over and that control and clarity had been firmly established. Yet, the experience left an indelible mark on both Dylan and I. We had seen the sharp edge of ambition, the subtle manipulations, and the stress of high-stakes negotiations. It was a reminder that power and influence are never safe without diligence, and that preparation is more than strategy, it's a shield. One evening, Dylan asked a question that made me pause. Mom, will I ever face something like this again? I considered it. Life has challenges, Dylan. Some are obvious, some hidden. But you've seen how to respond, calmly, strategically, without panic. That lesson, that skill, it stays with you forever. Nothing can take it away. He nodded thoughtfully. I feel stronger now, not just because of the outcome, but because I understand how to protect myself and the people I care about. I smiled, a quiet satisfaction filling me. Exactly. Strength isn't just about winning. It's about knowing when to act, how to act, and why. Today, we won because we understood all three. Months passed, and the estate continued to flourish. Investments grew, family relationships stabilized, and Dylan began taking a more active role in managing his own ventures. Jessica faded from our daily lives, her presence reduced to occasional formal correspondence. In reflecting on the ordeal, I realized that what we had truly protected wasn't just wealth or assets. It was trust, dignity, and the ability to face challenges with clarity and resolve. Every threat that came our way was a test, not just of resources, but of intelligence, patience, and character. And in that sense, the victory was more than legal or financial. It was moral and personal. It was a testament to the principle that foresight, preparation, and calm decisiveness always outweigh recklessness and ambition untempered by strategy. Dylan eventually asked one final question as we looked over the city from the estate balcony. Mom, do you think anyone can handle something like this? I looked at him, eyes reflecting both seriousness and warmth. Yes, if they learn to anticipate, plan, and act with intention. But most importantly, they must never let fear dictate their choices. Fear is the weapon of the unprepared. Clarity is the weapon of the wise. As the sun set over the city skyline, I felt the weight of tension lift entirely. The storm had passed, leaving behind not just safety and stability, but lessons etched deeply into both our lives. Dylan understood them, I understood them, and the Turner legacy remained firmly intact. The first weeks after the settlement were surprisingly calm. The city seemed to settle into its usual rhythm, but within our home, a new sense of order had taken root. Dylan had started participating more actively in daily decisions, observing, asking questions, and learning the subtleties of strategy that I had relied on for years. One morning, as we walked through the estate's gardens, he paused near the fountain, watching the water ripple in the sunlight. Mom, it's strange. Before all this, I never realized how much goes on behind the scenes. I just thought things happened. I smiled, brushing a stray leaf from my coat. That's because most people only see outcomes, Dylan. They don't see the careful moves, the calculations, or the patience that went into creating those outcomes. Life is mostly hidden mechanics. You just have to know how to read them. He nodded thoughtfully, as if absorbing a complex lesson without fully realizing it. I want to learn everything, not just about money or power, but about understanding people, predicting risks, and staying ahead. Good, I said, feeling a mixture of pride and relief, because knowledge like that is more valuable than any asset. It protects you, guides you, and ensures you can make informed decisions when it matters most. The estate had returned to its normal routine, but subtle changes had been implemented. I had updated security systems, refined organizational protocols, and reinforced communication channels among our advisors. It wasn't paranoia, it was prudence. We had been tested, and now the goal was to prevent such a test from ever threatening us again. One afternoon, Dylan accompanied me to review new investments. He scrutinized reports, asked probing questions, and even identified a potential oversight in one of our financial strategies. I leaned back in my chair, impressed by his analytical approach. "You're learning fast," I said. "But remember, knowledge without judgment can be dangerous. Always consider the long-term consequences of every decision." He smiled, a hint of determination in his eyes. "I understand. It's not just about what I see, it's about what I anticipate." Exactly. That was the mindset that had saved us from months of uncertainty. Anticipation, foresight, and composure. These were the real weapons, far more powerful than confrontation or aggression. Even as life normalized, there were moments that reminded us of the tension we had faced. Occasionally, a letter would arrive from a distant associate, carefully worded and professional, a subtle echo of past threats. Each time, I reviewed it calmly, analyzed it, and filed it without panic. Dylan observed these interactions closely, seeing firsthand that fear was unnecessary when preparation and logic guided action. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, Dylan asked a question that had lingered in his mind for weeks. Mom, what if someone else like her appears in the future? Someone clever, ambitious, and willing to take risks? I looked into the flames, considering my answer. Then we respond with the same principles that carried us through the storm: observation, patience, and strategy. But more importantly, we do not react out of fear. We act out of clarity. He absorbed this quietly, the lesson settling into his mind. It's strange. I feel stronger now, not just because of what happened, but because I understand how to handle it next time. That's the goal, I said. Strength isn't measured by victory alone. It's measured by preparation, insight, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. That is what will protect you throughout your life. Weeks turned into months, and Dylan began taking on small responsibilities, gradually gaining confidence in decision-making and strategic thinking. He was learning not only to manage resources, but also to understand human behavior, the subtle cues that reveal intentions, and the power of timing. Watching him grow was deeply rewarding. It was as if the ordeal had not only secured our assets, but had also shaped the next generation's ability to protect them. I, too, found time for reflection. The experience with Jessica had been intense, even frightening at times, but it had reinforced an essential truth: power and influence are meaningless without the wisdom to wield them responsibly. Wealth without vigilance is fragile. Influence without preparation is fleeting. And patience, calculated, disciplined patience, is often the most potent tool of all. One afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Dylan asked another question. Mom, do you think we're truly safe now? I considered it carefully. Nothing in life is ever completely safe, but what we can do is be prepared. We can anticipate challenges, act decisively, and protect ourselves. Safety isn't the absence of risk, it's the ability to respond wisely when risks arise. He nodded, understanding more than he could articulate. I think I get it. Strength isn't just about fighting, it's about knowing what to do before the fight even starts. Exactly, I said. That was the mindset that had saved us from months of uncertainty. Anticipation, foresight, and composure. These were the real weapons, far more powerful than confrontation or aggression. Even as life normalized, there were moments that reminded us of the tension we had faced. Occasionally, a letter would arrive from a distant associate of Jessica, carefully worded and professional, a subtle echo of past threats. Each time, I reviewed it calmly, analyzed it, and filed it without panic. Dylan observed these interactions closely, seeing firsthand that fear was unnecessary when preparation and logic guided action. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, Dylan asked a question that had lingered in his mind for weeks. Mom, what if someone else like her appears in the future? Someone clever, ambitious, and willing to take risks? I looked into the flames, considering my answer. Then we respond with the same principles that carried us through the storm: observation, patience, and strategy. But more importantly, we do not react out of fear. We act out of clarity. He absorbed this quietly, the lesson settling into his mind. It's strange. I feel stronger now, not just because of what happened, but because I understand how to handle it next time. That's the goal, I said. Strength isn't measured by victory alone. It's measured by preparation, insight, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. That is what will protect you throughout your life. Weeks turned into months, and Dylan began taking on small responsibilities, gradually gaining confidence in decision-making and strategic thinking. He was learning not only to manage resources, but also to understand human behavior, the subtle cues that reveal intentions, and the power of timing. Watching him grow was deeply rewarding. It was as if the ordeal had not only secured our assets, but had also shaped the next generation's ability to protect them. I, too, found time for reflection. The experience with Jessica had been intense, even frightening at times, but it had reinforced an essential truth: power and influence are meaningless without the wisdom to wield them responsibly. Wealth without vigilance is fragile. Influence without preparation is fleeting, and patience, calculated, disciplined patience, is often the most potent tool of all. One afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Dylan asked another question. Mom, do you think we're truly safe now? I considered it carefully. Nothing in life is ever completely safe, but what we can do is be prepared. We can anticipate challenges, act decisively, and protect ourselves. Safety isn't the absence of risk, it's the ability to respond wisely when risks arise. He nodded, understanding more than he could articulate. I think I get it. Strength isn't just about fighting, it's about knowing what to do before the fight even starts. Exactly, I said, feeling a sense of completion. The lessons had been learned, and the foundation for future stability had been laid. Our relationship with the outside world shifted subtly as well. Former competitors and associates who had observed our handling of the situation began to approach with newfound respect. No threats, no manipulation, just acknowledgement that we were capable, prepared, and vigilant. It was a reminder that reputation and measured action carry their own weight in shaping interactions and outcomes. Dylan observed these interactions closely, noting the contrast between those who act impulsively and those who operate with foresight. It's amazing, he said one day. Some people make enemies without even realizing it, while others quietly secure loyalty and respect just by staying calm and smart. That's the difference between impulse and strategy, I said, and it's a lesson most people only learn the hard way. In the evenings, we often sat together reviewing lessons from the ordeal, discussing scenarios and refining approaches. Dylan's growth was evident. He was more observant, analytical, and deliberate in his thinking. The experience had not only protected our assets, but had also transformed him into someone capable of managing challenges with composure and intelligence. One night, as we watched the city lights shimmer in the distance, Dylan turned to me and said, Mom, I think I'm ready to face whatever comes next, because I understand what you taught me. I smiled, a quiet pride welling up inside me. You are ready, Dylan, but remember, readiness is a continuous process. Life will always present new challenges, but the principles we've practiced will guide you through them. Months later, reflecting on the entire ordeal, I realized that the true victory was not in legal documents, settlements, or financial gains. It was in knowledge, preparation, and the development of wisdom. Every threat we faced had been an opportunity to strengthen ourselves, to observe patterns, and to act with intention. The lessons extended far beyond wealth. They were about life, human nature, and the quiet power of patience and foresight. As I closed my office for the evening and glanced at the city skyline, I felt a sense of completion. The storm had passed. The months following the conflict were quiet, but the lessons we had learned echoed through every decision we made. Dylan had matured rapidly, evolving from a curious observer into a thoughtful strategist, and I watched him with pride as he began applying the principles I had taught him, not just to finances or estate management, but to relationships, negotiations, and even subtle social interactions. One evening, we sat in the study, the city lights casting a warm glow across the room. Dylan leaned back in his chair, eyes reflecting both fatigue and clarity. Mom, I've been thinking, this whole experience, it wasn't just about money or power. It was about understanding people, patterns, and consequences. I feel changed. I nodded, sensing the depth of his realization. Exactly. True strength isn't measured in wealth or dominance. It's measured in knowledge, foresight, and the ability to stay composed when everything around you is chaotic. That is the legacy I want you to carry forward. He smiled, a spark of determination lighting his expression. I think I understand now. It's about being prepared, not just for the battles you see, but for the ones you can't predict. Anticipation is more powerful than reaction. I leaned back, satisfied. That understanding, that rare combination of insight and restraint, was far more valuable than any asset we had ever protected. As the estate returned to its normal rhythm, subtle changes had been made to ensure security and efficiency. Procedures were refined, communication lines strengthened, and safeguards put in place, not because we expected trouble, but because we had learned the cost of being unprepared. Dylan began taking on more responsibility, reviewing decisions with me, analyzing scenarios, and even suggesting improvements. He approached each task with a careful balance of caution and initiative, a reflection of both his natural intellect and the lessons learned from our ordeal. One afternoon, as we reviewed investment reports together, Dylan paused. "Mom, I noticed a potential risk here that might cause long-term problems if we ignore it. I think we should adjust our plan." I looked at him, impressed. Exactly the kind of foresight that matters. Always consider the ripple effects, not just the immediate outcome. That's how you protect what matters most. He nodded thoughtfully, absorbing the principle that knowledge without judgment is incomplete. Strategy without foresight is fragile, and patience, patient, deliberate patience, can often accomplish what force cannot. Life outside our walls seemed calmer too. Former adversaries and competitors approached with respect rather than hostility, recognizing our resilience and strategic acumen. It was a reminder that perception is as important as action. The world often judges not only by what you achieve, but by how composed and deliberate you remain in the process. Dylan observed these interactions closely, noting patterns in behavior, subtleties in tone, and unspoken intentions. "It's fascinating," he remarked one day. "Some people provoke conflict unknowingly, while others gain influence just by staying composed and observant. Timing and perception seem to matter as much as skill." "Exactly," I said. "Many people act impulsively, letting emotions dictate outcomes. True power lies in the ability to remain calm, anticipate moves, and act with clarity when it matters most." These lessons extended beyond business and family. They were life principles. Strategy, foresight, patience, and composure were tools that could shape destiny, protect loved ones, and turn challenges into opportunity. Dylan was learning that legacy was not just wealth, influence, or power. It was knowledge, wisdom, and preparedness passed to the next generation. The family began taking small trips, reconnecting with friends, and embracing normalcy. But I always ensured that each activity included subtle lessons. Observing human behavior, identifying opportunities, and understanding risk were woven into daily life. Dylan learned that strategy is not confined to offices or negotiations. It is part of every interaction, every decision, every subtle choice. One evening, as we walked through the quiet streets of the city, Dylan spoke. "Mom, do you think the future will always be this unpredictable?" I smiled softly. "Unpredictability is the nature of life. What matters is not trying to control it, but learning how to navigate it with composure and clarity. That's the real strength you carry now." He nodded, absorbing the wisdom like a sponge. "Then I feel ready, not because I know everything, but because I know how to handle what I don't know." Exactly. That was the culmination of everything we had endured. The realization that true preparedness is not certainty, but adaptability guided by insight. In quiet reflection, I often thought about the challenges we had faced. The threats, the manipulations, the tense negotiations. They were trials that tested not only our resources, but our judgment, patience, and resolve. And in the end, the greatest victories were invisible. The calm confidence in our decisions, the foresight that prevented crises, and the resilience cultivated in both Dylan and myself. I realized then that life's most profound lessons often come disguised as adversity. Wealth and power are fleeting. Influence is fragile. But insight, composure, and the ability to anticipate the unseen, these endure. These are the principles that protect, empower, and guide not just our actions, but our very legacy. Dylan's growth symbolized this truth. He had learned not only to navigate complexity, but to embrace it, to see challenges as opportunities for strategy and foresight, rather than threats. Watching him mature into this mindset filled me with hope. Hope that the knowledge, values, and principles we cultivated would carry forward long after our immediate struggles faded into memory. One quiet night, as the city lights reflected on the water, Dylan spoke again. "Mom, I think I understand now. Strength isn't just about what you own or the battles you win. It's about what you know, how you think, and how you respond when life tests you. I nodded, proud and quietly emotional. Yes, and it's a lesson that will follow you your entire life. Knowledge without judgment is incomplete. Action without clarity is wasted. And patience often outperforms force. Remember these principles, and no challenge will overwhelm you. He smiled, a mixture of determination and calm assurance in his expression. I will, I promise. And in that moment, I knew the ordeal had fulfilled its ultimate purpose, not simply to secure our assets, or resolve conflict, or even to protect our family, but to impart wisdom, resilience, and insight. The storm had passed, but the lessons would remain, shaping not only our present, but the future we would face. With confidence, foresight, and unwavering composure. In the months that followed, life unfolded steadily. Dylan's confidence grew, our operations stabilized, and the family found a renewed sense of unity and strength. The trials of the past were no longer a source of fear. They were a testament to endurance, intelligence, and the quiet power of preparation. And as I closed the office each evening, looking out over the city, I understood a final truth. Life will always present challenges, some expected, others unforeseen. But those who approach it with patience, insight, and calm decisiveness, those who understand that anticipation is more powerful than reaction, will not only survive, but thrive. Our legacy was no longer defined solely by wealth or influence. It was defined by wisdom, strategy, and the lessons we passed forward. That, more than anything, ensured that the next generation would be ready, not just for success, but for life itself. Tonight's story begins with a moment no mother should ever experience. A cold night, an empty porch, and a sound so faint it almost blended into the wind. There was no knock, no voice calling my name, no warning at all. Just a soft, broken whimper, and then the unmistakable sound of someone collapsing. When I opened the door, my daughter wasn't standing there. She was curled on the ground, shaking uncontrollably, her breath shuddering in short, painful bursts. Her hair was matted, her clothes torn, her face covered in bruises she had tried and failed to hide. For one terrifying second, I thought she wasn't breathing. And that moment, that single moment, felt like the earth had been ripped from beneath my feet. My name is Clara, and before this night, I believed I had seen fear. I believed I had felt heartbreak. I believed I understood pain. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepares a mother for the sight of her child broken on her doorstep at 1 a.m. I fell to my knees immediately, pulling her into my arms before she could slip further into the cold. Her body jerked with each breath. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked and faded. I pressed my hand against her cheek, and she winced, a quiet, involuntary flinch that told me everything she wasn't yet saying. "Emily," I whispered, "sweetheart, look at me. What happened? Who did this?" Her fingers clutched my jacket weakly, like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go. Her lips trembled as she struggled to form words. "Mom," she managed, her voice barely audible, I had to run." Those words alone sent a surge of panic through my chest. Emily was not the kind of woman who ran from anything. She faced challenges head-on, stubbornly, fearlessly. For her to run meant danger. Real danger. I lifted her inside, supporting her weight as gently as I could. She clung to me the whole way, her breathing shallow, her eyes unfocused. Once she was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, I knelt in front of her again. She tried to sit upright, but winced and pressed a hand to her ribs. At that moment, suspicion turned into dread. I remembered the small changes over the past year, missed calls, short conversations, excuses that didn't sound like her. She used to talk to me about everything, even the smallest details of her day. But after she married Jason, that light in her voice slowly faded. Whenever I asked about him, she assured me they were fine. "He's just stressed," she'd say. "He's trying his best." But now, staring at her bruised face, all those excuses felt like pieces of a puzzle I should have solved sooner. "Emily," I said quietly, "tell me what happened." She took a shaky breath, held it for a second, and then the truth came out in fragments. "I found out about the other woman," she whispered. "I confronted him. I told him I was leaving. I was done." Her voice cracked. "He didn't let me go. He grabbed me. He pushed me. He wasn't alone. She was there. They both." Her voice broke entirely. I felt a cold stillness settle inside me. Not shock, not disbelief. Something sharper, something older, something fierce enough to burn through every ounce of fear I'd ever known. I reached for her hands. "Emily, you're here now. You're safe. Nobody is touching you again. Do you understand me?" She nodded, but her expression said she didn't believe safety existed anywhere anymore. And that look of pure despair did something to me that I can't fully explain. When she drifted into an exhausted sleep on the couch, with the blanket pulled up to her chin and tears still drying on her cheeks, I stood up slowly. I looked at her for a long moment, memorizing her breathing, making sure she was comfortable. Then I walked to my room. I didn't turn the lights on. I didn't need to. I knew exactly where everything was. I opened my closet and pulled out the uniform I hadn't worn in years. Not the one for my job. The one I wore on nights when something needed to be handled quietly, cleanly, and without hesitation. As I slid it on, something inside me settled in place. A clarity, a purpose, a quiet promise that no one, not Jason, not his mistress, not anyone, would ever lay a hand on my daughter again. I picked up my phone. I dialed a number I hoped I'd never need again. The moment the call connected, I didn't say my name or explain the situation. I simply spoke 4 calm, steady words. Words I had never imagined myself saying for my own child. "Tonight, we end this." I hung up without waiting for a response. Then I grabbed my keys, took one last look at my sleeping daughter, and stepped out into the night, ready for whatever came next. The road felt colder that night, colder than the weather should have allowed. Streetlights passed like silent witnesses as I drove, my hand steady on the wheel, my mind clearer than it had been in years. There's a strange calm that settles over you when fear stops being an option. When the choice isn't between action or inaction, but between your child's safety and everything else. I pulled into the old industrial area on the outskirts of town, the place where conversations happened that were never spoken of afterward. My contact was already there, leaning against a rusted metal railing. He didn't smile when he saw me. He didn't ask why I called. He didn't need to. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly as I stepped out of the car. "Yes," I said, locking the car behind me. He put his hands on my daughter. I'm not letting that go. He nodded once. It wasn't approval, it was understanding. We talked for a few minutes, enough to lay out what needed to be done. Not revenge, not violence, just consequences. Real ones. The kind men like Jason never think will reach them. When I finally drove away, the sky was beginning to lighten with the faintest hint of dawn. The world was waking up, but inside me, something entirely different had awakened, a promise I fully intended to keep. When I got back home, the house was silent. I closed the door gently behind me. Emily was still asleep in the living room, curled on her side under the blanket. The bruises on her face looked darker now, sharp against her pale skin. Her breathing was shallow but steady. For a moment, I just stood there, watching her, letting the reality sink in. My little girl had come home because she had nowhere else to run. I walked into the kitchen and warmed a pot of water. The quiet hum of the stove felt surreal after the night I'd just had. When the water was ready, I made tea and carried it to the coffee table, just as Emily began to stir. She opened her eyes slowly, wincing at the beam of early morning light slipping through the curtains. It took a few seconds for her to gather where she was. Then she saw me sitting beside her. "Mom," she whispered, trying to sit up. Easy, I said gently, adjusting the pillow behind her. You don't have to move yet. You're safe here. She nodded, rubbing her hands together to warm them. She looked smaller than she had in years, fragile in a way I'd never seen her before. It broke my heart. Did he follow me? She asked suddenly, panic flickering in her voice. No, I said firmly. He won't be coming here. She searched my face, trying to read the meaning beneath my words. What did you do? Nothing you need to worry about right now, I answered, not lying, but not giving more than she could handle. Her eyes filled again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was relief. Relief so heavy it looked like it might crush her from the inside. Mom, I'm sorry, she whispered, for not telling you sooner, for hiding everything, for thinking I could fix him. I reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Sweetheart, you don't ever need to apologize for trusting someone you loved. That's not a flaw. That's who you are. She closed her eyes, tears slipping out anyway. I kept thinking I was overreacting, she said. He would yell, and then he'd apologize. He'd call me names, and then he'd buy me gifts. He'd ruin a day, and then promised he'd change. I thought maybe I wasn't doing enough. Maybe I was the problem. My jaw tightened involuntarily. I had seen this pattern before, in other women, in old friends, in women who didn't survive it. But hearing my own daughter speak those words was something else entirely. It made my blood heat in a way nothing else could. You were never the problem, I said softly, but firmly. He broke you down little by little so you'd question your own strength. People like him don't want strong women. They want control. Emily swallowed hard. When I found the messages, when I saw her picture in his phone, I finally said something, and he lost it. I took her hand gently. Emily, did he hit you before last night? She hesitated, and that hesitation was answer enough. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't let it show. She didn't need my anger in that moment. She needed my presence. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I thought leaving would be simple, she said quietly. Just walk out the door and never look back. But he said he'd find me. He said nobody leaves him. I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her close. He doesn't get to decide your life, I whispered. Not anymore. She took another breath, deeper this time. What do I do now? You stay here, I said. You rest. You heal. Everything else, I'll handle. Her eyes softened with a trust I hadn't seen in years. She nodded, finally letting her guard down. The rest of the morning passed slowly. I made her a light breakfast. She ate quietly, the occasional wince reminding me she was hurt deeper than she admitted. I placed cold compresses on her cheek and ribs. She barely spoke, but she didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was safe. By afternoon, she had fallen asleep again. I covered her with another blanket, brushing her forehead gently before stepping back. Then my phone vibrated. A single message, nothing more than an address and a time. The next phase was already set. I looked at my daughter one more time. She slept with her hand curled near her chin like she used to when she was little. My heart clenched again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was resolve. Because the man who hurt her, the man who thought he was untouchable, the man who believed there were no consequences for tormenting my child, was about to learn that he had picked the wrong woman's daughter. I slipped my phone into my pocket, took a slow breath, and whispered to myself, "This ends today." I left the house quietly, careful not to wake Emily. The air outside was warmer than the night before, but inside my chest, everything felt cold and sharp. The kind of sharpness that comes when you've made a decision you cannot take back. The message on my phone repeated in my mind. An address, a time, nothing more. But I didn't need more. I knew exactly what it meant. I drove without turning on the radio. The silence helped me think. Every mile I put between me and my house felt like one step closer to something inevitable. The old warehouse district looked almost abandoned as I pulled in. Tall brick buildings, broken windows, weeds claiming the concrete, This place had seen secrets far older than mine. A black SUV was parked near the loading dock. The door opened before I even stepped out of my car. "You're early," the man said. "I don't like being late," I replied. He nodded, then held out a folder. "Everything you asked for is inside. Proof, records, statements, photos, communications. Enough to destroy him socially, financially, and legally. There's no coming back from this once it starts." "I don't want him coming back from anything," I said, taking the folder. There was no hesitation in my voice. The time for doubt had passed the moment my daughter collapsed at my door. "What about the other woman?" he asked. "She made her choice," I said sharply. "She stood there and watched him hurt my daughter. She doesn't get a free pass." He folded his arms. "You're going to confront him yourself?" "I need him to see me," I said. "I need him to understand exactly who he tried to break." He stared at me for a moment, then exhaled slowly like he wanted to say something but knew better. "Be careful." "I always am." I walked back to my car, the folder under my arm, the silence following me like a shadow. As I drove to the address where Jason would be, his office, the one he treated like a throne, I felt something steady settle inside me. This wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. The kind of clarity that comes only after someone you love has been pushed past the point of breaking. His building came into view, a sleek glass structure gleaming in the afternoon sun. I parked across the street, watching through the windshield as employees walked in and out. None of them suspected that today was going to be the last normal day of their boss's life. I waited until I saw him step outside. Jason. Perfectly pressed suit, polished shoes, smug smile that made my stomach twist. He looked exactly like the man he pretended to be. Successful, charming, respectable. The kind of man people believe without question. And yet, my daughter's bruised face was all I could see. I got out of the car and walked toward him slowly, deliberately. He didn't notice me at first. He was too busy talking on his phone, probably lying to someone the way he always did. But then, he saw me. His eyebrows lifted in surprise, then confusion, then something that might have been discomfort. "Clara, what are you doing here? Is Emily okay?" The fake concern in his voice was so thick, I almost laughed. I stopped a few feet in front of him, holding the folder at my side. "She's safe now," I said calmly, "which is more than I can say for you." He frowned, glancing around like he was afraid someone would hear. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, stepping closer, "I know what you did." His face stiffened for a fraction of a second, just long enough to confirm everything I needed. "Clara," he said, lowering his voice, "I don't know what Emily told you, but she's been emotional lately. She gets overwhelmed, she misinterprets things. I've been trying." "Stop," I said sharply. "Don't finish that sentence." He froze. "I know about the cheating. I know about the messages. I know about the woman you've been seeing for months. And I know that when my daughter confronted you, you didn't just yell. You didn't just insult her. You put your hands on her." Jason's jaw tightened. His eyes darted away for a single heartbeat, a small, guilty, panicked flicker. And then he tried to regain control. "Clara, look, you're upset. I get that. But Emily exaggerates sometimes. She gets dramatic and—" That was it. I opened the folder in front of him and revealed the first photo. His face drained of color. One by one, I held up evidence, screenshots, time-stamped conversations, bank transfers to the other woman, hotel receipts, and finally, the photo of Emily's bruises taken just hours earlier. He looked like someone had ripped the air out of his lungs. "You should know," I said quietly, "this isn't just going to your HR department. It's going to law enforcement, to the board, to your business partners, and to every connection you've built this entire career." His voice shook. You can't do this." "I already have." He reached out, like he wanted to grab my arm, but I stepped back before he could touch me. "Don't," I warned. You will never put your hands on anyone in my family again." He stared at me, his face twisted between anger and fear. "You're ruining my life." I nodded slowly. "No, I'm ending what you started the second you thought you could hurt her without consequences." Before he could speak again, someone stepped out of the building calling his name. Jason flinched, panic flashing in his eyes. He didn't know if they had heard. He didn't know what came next. But I did. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there with the papers shaking in his hands. When I reached my car, my phone buzzed again. Not a message this time, but a missed call from Emily. My heart tightened. She must have woken up and realized I wasn't home. I took a breath, one steadying breath, before calling her back. "Mom?" Her voice sounded small, frightened. "Where are you?" "I'm coming home," I said softly. "Everything's going to be all right." As I pulled away from the building, I didn't look back. Jason's world had just started cracking, and I wasn't done yet. The drive back home felt heavier than the trip out, not because I doubted what I'd done, but because I knew this was only the beginning. Jason wasn't the kind of man who accepted consequences quietly. Men like him cling to power the way a drowning person clings to air, and losing control over my daughter had probably shaken him more than anything else. When I pulled into the driveway, I could see Emily standing near the window, her arms wrapped around herself. The moment she saw my car, she moved away from the glass and opened the door before I even reached it. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice a mix of fear and exhaustion. I stepped inside and closed the door gently behind me. I had to take care of something. Her eyes searched my face, looking for anything: anger, guilt, regret, but she didn't find any. "Mom, I didn't want you to get involved," she whispered. "This is my mess. I should have handled it." I shook my head. "You don't handle abuse alone, not ever." She took a shaky breath and pressed her lips together. The purple around her cheek looked darker now, spreading along her jawline. She winced as she turned her head. It made my chest tighten all over again. "Come sit," I said, leading her to the couch. "Tell me how you're feeling." She lowered herself slowly, careful with every movement. "I keep thinking he's going to show up," she said quietly. "He always used to say he'd find me no matter where I went. He made it sound like love, but now I hear it differently." "It wasn't love," I said. "It was control." She nodded, her eyes dropping to her hands. "I'm scared." "I know," I said, "but he's the one who should be scared now." Her head lifted slightly, not in confusion, more like disbelief. "Mom, what does that mean?" "It means I confronted him," I said, "and I gave him proof that he can't run from this." Her eyes widened. "You went to him?" "Yes." "What if he hurts you too?" I smiled softly. "He won't. Men like him only hit the people they think won't hit back." She swallowed hard, absorbing every word. "What did he say?" she asked. "Nothing useful," I replied. "He tried to lie, tried to blame you, tried to act like the victim, but the truth is louder than his excuses." Emily inhaled deeply, her shoulders trembling. "I can't believe I ever loved him." "That wasn't your fault," I said. "You loved the version of him he showed you, not the man he really was." She leaned back, her eyes closing. I could tell she was replaying everything. Every insult disguised as a joke, every apology that meant nothing, every time he chipped away at her confidence until she questioned her own worth. "I don't even recognize the person I became with him," she said softly. "He made me think I needed him, that I wasn't enough without him." I brushed her arm gently. "You were enough long before he came along, and you'll be more than enough long after he's gone." For the first time since she had arrived last night, a tiny, fragile spark returned to her expression. Not a smile, not strength, just the faintest hint of something healing. "I want to get better," she said. "I want to feel like myself again." "You will," I promised, "one day at a time." Just as she exhaled, a hard knock sounded at the door. Emily jumped, her breath catching instantly. Every muscle in her body tensed like she was preparing for impact. "It's okay," I whispered, placing a hand on her knee. "Stay here." I walked to the door slowly, placing myself between her and whatever was on the other side. When I opened it, I didn't find Jason. I found 2 police officers. My heart dropped, not in fear, but in anticipation. "Ma'am," the taller officer said, "we need to speak with you and your daughter." Emily's voice trembled from behind me. "Mom, what's happening?" "Everything's all right," I said, even though I wasn't entirely sure. I stepped outside onto the porch, closing the door just enough to shield her, but not enough to seem uncooperative. "What's going on?" I asked. "We received a call from Mr. Jason Turner," the officer said. "He reported that you confronted him at his workplace, threatened him, and distributed confidential company information." A slow, humorless smile crept onto my face. Of course he did. Of course he ran straight to the police when someone stood up to him. "Is that all?" I asked calmly. The officer frowned slightly. "Ma'am, he also stated that you intend to ruin his career out of personal revenge." I crossed my arms. "Did he also mention the part where he assaulted my daughter?" Both officers exchanged a quick glance. "No, ma'am," the second one said. "Of course not," I said. I opened the door wider and gestured inside, and Emily stiffened on the couch. She looked at them like she expected Jason to walk in behind them. Her hands trembled against the blanket. "Emily," I said softly, "they're here to listen." The younger officer knelt beside her gently. "Ma'am, did your husband hurt you?" Emily's chin wobbled. She tried to speak, but the words came out broken at first. "Yes," she whispered. "He did." "Can you tell us what happened?" She looked at me, not for permission, but for strength. And she told them everything. Not just last night. Everything. The yelling, the threats, the manipulation, the bruises she hid with makeup, the messages from the other woman, the night he grabbed her so violently she couldn't breathe, the moment she finally ran, the porch where she collapsed. By the time she finished, both officers were silent. The younger one's jaw was tight. The older one's expression had shifted completely. When Emily broke down, I held her while she cried, and neither officer rushed her. Finally, the tall one stood up. "Ma'am, the evidence you have, do you still have it?" "Yes," I said, "every piece." "We're going to need it," he said, "and I want you to know you did the right thing coming forward, both of you." Emily nodded through tears. The officers exchanged another glance, then the older one gave a small, reassuring nod. "We'll take it from here," he said. "You two stay safe tonight. We'll be in touch soon." After they left, Emily collapsed into my arms again. "Mom, what's going to happen?" I stroked her hair gently. "Justice," I said, "one way or another." But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Jason wasn't finished, and neither was I. She tried sitting up again, but her body trembled like her bones had turned to paper. I placed my hand on her shoulder and gently pushed her back. "Stop forcing yourself. Your body needs to rest. Everything else can wait." She nodded, even though frustration flickered in her eyes. She hated feeling helpless. She hated depending on anyone, especially me. She had always been fiercely independent, the type of girl who would carry grocery bags heavier than her just to prove she could. But right now, even lifting a glass of water was a struggle. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. Not a normal ring, the kind someone presses when they're panicked and don't know what else to do. I walked down the hallway, my heart already racing. When I opened the door, my neighbor stood there with wide eyes. "There's a man outside," she whispered, "asking about your daughter. He looks angry." My stomach dropped. I didn't need a name. I didn't need a description. I knew exactly who it was. I closed the door immediately and locked it. Then I double-locked it. Then I walked back with a calmness I didn't actually feel. My daughter's head lifted just enough for her eyes to find mine. "Is it him?" she whispered. I didn't answer, not because I wanted to lie, but because I didn't want her to panic. Her breathing was already too fast, too shallow. She grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "Mom, don't let him in. Please, I can't." Her voice broke. "I can't face him." "You won't," I said firmly. "Not today, not ever again if I can help it." But even as I said that, I could hear footsteps outside. Slow, heavy, pacing, like an animal waiting to attack. I pulled the curtains shut and turned off the living room lights. My daughter watched me, tears forming again. "Why won't he just leave?" she whispered. "Because men like him don't take rejection as an answer," I said softly. "They think they own everything they touch." She swallowed hard. "He said that," she whispered. "He told me I belonged to him, like I wasn't a person, just something he could use." That made something inside me burn. Not anger, something deeper, a kind of fury I didn't know I was capable of. I sat on the edge of the couch and pulled her close, letting her cry into my shoulder. For a moment, it felt like she was my little girl again, scared of thunderstorms, running into my arms because she believed I could protect her from anything. But this wasn't a storm. This was a man, and men like him don't go away on their own. A sudden knock shattered the silence. 3 loud bangs. She froze. I stood up slowly, signaling her not to move. My steps were near silent as I went to the door, but I didn't open it. I didn't speak. I just listened. "Open the damn door," his voice barked. My daughter covered her mouth to stifle a cry. He banged again. "I know she's in there." My hand curled into a fist against the wall, but I still didn't respond. Let him scream. Let him pound. He wasn't getting in. After a long minute, the banging stopped. His breathing on the other side was loud, ragged, furious. Then silence. Then footsteps fading away. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. When I returned to the living room, she looked up with terrified eyes. "Is he gone?" "For now," I said quietly. She sank back into the blanket, shaking again. "Mom, I don't want to go back. Not ever. Even if he begs, even if he apologizes, I can't pretend anymore." "You won't go back," I said firmly. "You're home now, and you're not alone." She looked like she wanted to believe me, but something kept pulling her back into her fear. What if he hurts you? What if he comes after you next? I smiled gently. "Sweetheart, I'm a mother. I've survived worse than him." But deep inside, I knew this wasn't over. Men like him don't disappear quietly. They wait, they plot, they punish. And I wasn't going to let him walk all over her again. He had made one mistake. One fatal mistake. He hurt my daughter. And now, I was going to be the one he should fear. But she didn't need to hear that yet. She needed rest. She needed air. She needed to feel safe again. So I tucked the blanket around her, smoothed her hair back, and whispered, "Just sleep. Let me handle the rest." As she slowly drifted off, the house finally quiet again, I sat beside her and watched the rise and fall of her breathing. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, I would stop being patient. Tomorrow, I would fight back. Because no mother sits still while her child bleeds. I barely slept that night. Every time the floor creaked or a car passed outside, my eyes snapped open. My body stayed tense, listening for footsteps, for a voice, for anything that meant danger had returned. But the house stayed quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, it feels like a warning. At around 6 a.m., sunlight slipped through the curtains. My daughter was still asleep on the couch, curled into herself like she was afraid the world might touch her again. I didn't want to wake her, but I knew she needed real medical attention. The bruises on her arms, the way her breathing hitched whenever she shifted, it wasn't just exhaustion, it was trauma. I made some coffee and waited for her to stir on her own. When she finally opened her eyes, she looked disoriented, like she didn't remember where she was. For a moment, panic flashed across her face. "It's okay," I said softly. "You're home." Her shoulders eased a little as she recognized me. "Did he come back?" she whispered. "No," I said. "He stayed gone." She let out a shaky breath. "I keep thinking this is all a dream or a nightmare." "It's real," I said, "but you're safe here." She tried lifting herself up, wincing in pain. I hurried over and supported her. "Don't push yourself." "I have to," she whispered. "I need to fix this." "You are fixing it," I told her. "You left." She didn't argue, but her eyes lowered, like she wasn't sure I was right. She had lived with control and fear for so long that freedom didn't feel real yet. "I want to get checked," she finally said. "I want to know if anything is wrong inside." I was going to suggest the same. We got ready slowly. She moved like someone carrying invisible fractures. I helped her into a sweatshirt, gently brushing her hair back when she flinched at the touch. Every small reaction broke my heart a little more. What had he done to her? What had she endured alone? We drove to the clinic in silence. She kept her hands in her lap, fingers twisting together anxiously. Every time a car behind us sped up or slowed down, she stiffened. "Do you think he's watching?" she whispered. "No," I said firmly, "and even if he tried, he wouldn't get anywhere near you." At the clinic, a nurse took her in immediately after seeing her condition. I stayed in the hallway, pacing, my hands clenched. Every scream I imagined she swallowed down during those abusive nights replayed in my mind. I didn't realize how tightly I was holding my breath until a doctor opened the door. "She's bruised, underweight, and dehydrated," he said. "She's been under extreme stress, physically and emotionally." I nodded, struggling to keep my anger from boiling over. "We've given her fluids and something for the pain," he continued gently. "She'll be okay, but recovery will take time." When they let me inside, she looked even smaller under the fluorescent lights. Pale, exhausted, but alive. She reached for my hand like a child and whispered, "I'm sorry." I sat beside her. "For what?" "For hiding it, for not telling you sooner, for letting it get this far." "You didn't let anything happen," I said firmly. "You survived something most people never escape from. And you're here. That's what matters." Her eyes welled up again. "Do you think he's going to come after me?" "Yes," I said honestly. "He will." She blinked in fear. "But he won't succeed," I added softly, "because he doesn't get to hurt you anymore." A nurse brought her some warm soup. She tried eating, her hands shaking, but she forced herself through it. Even broken, she was fighting. When we finally left the clinic, she leaned against me, exhausted. "Mom, I don't know how to start my life over," she whispered. "You don't have to start alone," I said. "We'll take it one day at a time, one breath at a time." But as we approached the car, something stopped us cold. A small note was tucked under the windshield wiper. A note with her name written in his handwriting. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Mom, he found us." I snatched the note before she could see more. The message was short. "You can run, but you're still mine." My blood went ice cold. I tore the note in half right there, letting the pieces fall to the ground. She stared at me, terrified. "What do we do now?" she whispered. I took her face gently in my hands. "We don't hide," I said. "We fight," I said. But she didn't know what I meant yet. She didn't know that tonight, everything would change. She didn't know that I had already decided to end this, permanently. She didn't know I was done being patient. She would learn soon enough. And so would he.